Good morning, good day, or good evening, wherever you are. Orzhov is the embodiment of death in Texas, so you clicking on this video really was inevitable. And let me tell you, for this one we are cooking. Usually when doing these videos, I have one, maybe two commanders that really make my wallet sweat. But not only do I already own two decks in this color combination already, I am certain I will build decks around at least two of the upcoming commanders in the near future. As always, these videos are meant to serve as a starting point for you to find some new inspiration and then get to building around these wonderful cards yourself. But for now, whether you are doom scrolling on Reddit, working out, or mindlessly fighting off mono red decks in best of one arena, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Let's kick this list off and test my Spanish pronunciation with Amalia Benavides Aguirre, a 2-mana 2/2 Vampire Scout. It has Ward, pay 3 life, which is nice, but in Commander it doesn't really matter. And when you gain life, Amalia Benavides explores, then destroy all other creatures if its power is exactly 20. If you follow 60 card formats, you might know the Amalia Wildgrowth Walker combo. Wildgrowth Walker being a card that gets a +1/+1 counter whenever you explore and also gains you 3 life, so you just go infinite immediately and have an 20/20 Amalia, or I think it's a 21/21 Amalia, I'm not quite sure. But due to the color restrictions in Commander, this is of course not possible because Wildgrowth Walker is green. Nonetheless, I think Amalia has the potential to be a pretty cool commander. On the one hand, it's a board clear that announces itself. On the other hand, it is a commander that potentially one-shots someone after the board wipe. And she does those things while also providing card advantage with her explore ability. I would pair her with the classic Soul Sister package, adding cards like Marauding Blight Priest, which reads whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. And very importantly, just ways to give your creatures indestructible, like Selfless Spirit, who you can sacrifice to give all your creatures indestructible. Alternatively, you could try and mostly ignore creatures as a type and rely on cards like Ajani's Welcome, the Sanguine Bond Exquisite Blood combo, which goes infinite once you gain a single point of life or someone loses life, and one of my favorite cards, Righteous Cause, which is a 5-mana enchantment that reads whenever a creature attacks, you gain 1 life. So for each creature, you get 1 trigger, and since Amalia cares about just the smallest instance of gaining a life, it doesn't matter, you just need a lot of triggers, this will make you explore a bunch of times. Atreus, God of Passage, is a 3-mana 5/4 god from Theros. It has indestructible. Like all the gods, there's a condition to it being a creature. In his case, as long as your devotion to white and black is less than 7, Atreus is not a creature, it's instead an indestructible enchantment. The actual text on the card reads, whenever another creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. I admit this one is mostly here because I love the flavor of the creatures not being allowed into the afterlife if no one pays for them. If I had to build a deck around Athreos, I would make sure to include effects that make dying triggers double up, like Drivnod and Teysa, maybe even going as far as to put Roaming Throne on God. Athreos also pairs nicely with cards like Tormod and Desecrated Tomb, as the creatures that die are actually put into the graveyard, but then leave it to go back to your hand. So this is not a replacement effect that prevents them from going to the graveyard in the first place. Desecrated Tomb and Tormod will trigger, and you will get the 1/1 Black Bat or 2/2 Black Zombie, respectively. When you're trying to go off with an aristocrat's strategy, you need 3 things: a sacrifice outlet, sacrifice fodder, and a payoff. That is a lot of different pieces you need to assemble. This is why usually I would recommend you always choose a commander that fulfills one of those roles. So let's take Baron Bertram Greywater for example. It is a 4-mana vampire noble. It's a 3/4, and whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 black vampire rogue creature token with lifelink. This ability triggers only once each turn. And also, very importantly, for 2 mana and sacrificing another creature or artifact, you get to draw a card. Now, In this case, you might be able to skip out on sacrifice fodder a bit, and you also don't need quite as many sacrifice outlets. Sure, paying 2 mana per sacrifice is not good enough to truly combo off, but I love that this ability digs you deeper for your missing pieces. Note that his first ability also triggers off of non-creature tokens, and you can sacrifice them as well, which is finally a good use for those food tokens. If you enjoy politicking and Commander, Brina the Demagogue was made specifically with you in mind. It is a 3 mana 1/3 bird warlock. It has flying because it's a bird, and whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, if that opponent has more life than another of your opponents, that attacking player draws a card, and you put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature you control. The basic idea is to play your opponents like a fiddle and make them attack each other. They benefit because they draw a card. You benefit by putting counters on your creatures. There's a few cards that I could see work really nicely in this deck. Combat Calligrapher is a 4 mana 3/3 bird cleric. Flying, Inklings can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. Why is that important? Well, because whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, that attacking player creates a tapped 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying that's attacking said opponent. So another one of those birds that really hates people in general and rewards your opponents for fighting amongst themselves. Whenever I read something about opponents attacking, I think of Mangara the Diplomat, 4 mana 2/4 lifelink. Whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you or a planeswalker you control, you draw a card. And whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card. On the one hand, this again deters opponents from attacking you because you would draw cards. On the other hand, if they are attacking other opponents, they will draw cards, making it more likely they double spell, making it more likely that you draw a card. Similar, but different, and I think more expensive also, is Trouble in Pairs, 4 mana enchantment. If an opponent would begin an extra turn, they skip it instead, but more importantly, whenever an opponent attacks you with 2 or more creatures, draws their second card each turn, or casts their second spell each turn, you get to draw a card. So very similar in spirit to Mangara. A card that makes good use of the counters you put on creatures. I mean, there's lots of cards, but just one that I thought of is Scholar of the New Horizons. 2 mana 1/1. It enters with a +1/+1 counter on it already, and you get to tap it and remove a counter from any permanent you control to search your library for a plains card and reveal it. If an opponent controls more lands than you may put that card onto the battlefield tapped. If you don't, you get to put it in your hand. Again, every color that isn't green kind of struggles with keeping up with the green ramp, and white has this mechanic as a way to combat that. All of the New Horizons is like the perfect example for a Brina deck of what white ramp can look like. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about Purge Protection. Pretty new instant, 6 mana, so expensive, and it has the clause gift an extra turn, which means you can give an extra turn to someone else as you are casting this spell. Why would you ever want to do this? Well, because you get to create 4 2/2 blue bird creature tokens with flying. If the gift was promised, so if you gave an extra turn to someone else, all permanents you control phase out, which means you pretend like they don't exist. And until your next turn, your life total can't change and you gain protection from everything. Safety valve, you have to exile Purge Protection so you can't get it back from the graveyard. This is so fun. You just step back, select someone, give them a nice kiss on the cheek and say, do whatever you like. I'm out. Note that, of course, since you have to pretend like your permanents and creatures don't exist, you won't draw a card off of Brina, but it really embodies the spirit of Brina. Brima's Blight of Oreskos is a 4 mana 3/4 Phyrexian cat, but it's not a cat tribal commander. It reads, whenever you cast a Phyrexian creature or artifact creature spell, incubate X, where X is that spell's mana value. As a reminder, incubating X means you get to create an incubator token with X +1/+1 counters on it. And for 2 mana, generic, you get to transform the artifact and it transforms into a Phyrexian 0/0 artifact creature. So basically it's as strong as the counters on it. And secondly, at the beginning of each end step, if a Phyrexian died under your control this turn, proliferate. So the basic idea is you accumulate these incubator tokens, you transform them. If one of them dies, all the incubator tokens get stronger, so your future creatures will be stronger as well. I was honestly a bit surprised by how many Phyrexians there are, but honestly, a lot of them are pretty mediocre. Instead, I see Brimmis as one of the best affinity commanders in Black-White. The synergy obviously being that Brimmis creates artifact tokens that let you cast high mana value creatures like Myr Enforcer and the mighty Mycosynth Golem for cheap, summoning even larger and larger men as the game goes on. Unfortunately, a lot of the affinity stuff is locked behind blue, so you need some other high mana value cheap to play cards like Ancient Stone Idol, which gets cheaper for each attacking creature, which in Commander I think is actually better than it ever is in any other format. And stuff like Metalwork Colossus, which gets cheaper for the amount of converted mana cost on non-creature artifacts you control combined. Of course, you can absolutely still play Phyrexians even if you choose to go for the artifact approach. Elesh Norn, Progenitor Exarch, and Seedpot Caretaker are all Phyrexians that trigger Brimmis and can also transform the incubator tokens, so make sure to put them in your deck no matter what. One more Spanish name, Clavileño. Ooh, I might have butchered that one. First of the Blessed is a 3-mana 2/2 Vampire Cleric. Whenever you attack, target attacking vampire that isn't a demon becomes a demon in addition to its other types. It also gains, when this creature dies, draw a card and create a tapped 4/3 white and black vampire demon creature token with flying. This works really nicely with, for example, Baron Bertram Greywater, and thankfully the Venn diagram of vampires and aristocrats has a pretty big overlap. One of the best sacrifice outlets in Magic is Viscera Seer, Vampire. Yahenni Undying Partisan, great card in a 4-player format and great sacrifice outlet, a Vampire. Master of Dark Rites, who sacrifices your newly gained demons to turn them into rituals, you guessed it, also a Vampire. Daxos the Returned is a 3-mana 2/2 zombie soldier. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you get an experience counter. And for 3 mana as an activated ability, put a white and black spirit enchantment creature token onto the battlefield. It has this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of experience counters you have. This feels like a pretty good pillow fort commander. You just hide behind the No Mercies, Aurifications, and Ghostly Prisons of the world, and late into the game, you just create these huge spirit tokens. Note that it is very hard to remove experience counters, but you can definitely proliferate them. So I would make sure to include a Karn's Bastion, a land that can proliferate for 4 mana and tapping in the mana base, and maybe even a Staff of Completion, since life should really be expendable in your Pillow Fort deck, and you only create about upping and upping those experience counters. Ariete of the Charmed Apple is a 3-mana 2/4 human warlock. It has 2 paragraphs. Each creature that's enchanted by an aura you control can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. Also, at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the amount of auras you control. In the green-red video, we talked about Kaima the Fractured Calm, and Ariete really works quite similarly, but for a cheaper price. Similar to Kaima, Ariete's first ability makes it so your opponent's creatures that are enchanted by your auras can't attack you, and the second ability, again quite like Kaima's, serves as a way to end the game. One very important difference here is, though, Kaima goads the creatures, which means once the game turns into a 1v1, your opponent's suited up creatures can suddenly attack you again, making it very awkward that you spent a lot of mana and time and cards on them not attacking you. Ariete, on the other hand, specifically says that those creatures can't attack you, even if it's a 1v1. Still, you need to absolutely make sure Ariete stays alive so they can't come after you, because the game won't last long if she's not there anymore. Kambal Profiteering Maya is a 3-mana 2/4 human advisor. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your opponent's control, for each of them, create a tapped token that's a copy of it. This ability triggers only once each turn. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This is where my deck building senses really start to tingle, because Kambal is really interesting as it opens up a completely new avenue and a new category of cards. I mean, sure, Combat Calligrapher works really well again, but cards like Curse of Disturbance are suddenly a must. Curse of Disturbance makes it so you enchant a player, and whenever that player is attacked, you get to create a 2/2 zombie creature token, and each opponent attacking that player does the same. So suddenly you get 2/2/2s. Forbidden Orchard, of course, is a land that taps for mana of any color, but whenever you tap it, target opponent creates a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token. Suddenly you also get a 1/1 if Kambal is around. Hunted Horror and Hunted Lamassu are extremely overstated creatures whose downside is that your opponents get to make 2 3/3 green centaur tokens, or in the case of Hunted Lamassu, a 4/4 black horror creature token. Suddenly, if Kambal is around, you get those tokens. Slaughter Specialist is a 2 mana 3/3. When it enters, each opponent gets a 1/1 white human creature token, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, it gets stronger. 3 creature tokens for your opponents means 3 tokens for you. Marching Duodrone is mostly an afterthought from the Baldur's Gate set, but it is a 2 mana 2/2 that when it attacks, lets each player create a treasure token. Suddenly, you get more out of this deal than all of your opponents. Angelic Ascension suddenly becomes an insane removal spell. It's a 2 mana instant. Exile target creature. Its controller creates a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. But you get that as well. And, you know, the list goes on and on and on. Staples like Generous Gift and Stroke of Midnight become even better. And I really feel like the sky is the limit. Or maybe your research is the limit for Kambal Profiteering Maya. Catchamos the New Dawn is a 3 mana 4/4 god, menace, lifelink, and indestructible. Unlike the Theros god, it's not a creature, but Catchamos can't attack or block unless there are 7 or more cards in exile. Whenever 1 or more cards are put into exile from graveyards and or the battlefield, during your turn, you draw a card and you lose a life. Unlike modern players struggling to put together a deck without selling their kidneys, thankfully, you only need 1 copy of Ketramos if you want to build a deck around him. To start, I would take a look at the important cards from modern lists and complement them with all the nice cards and toys that larger card pool of Commander has to offer. Thalia, Exuberant Shepherd, is a 2 mana 2/2 dog with flash, and whenever it attacks, you get to exile up to 1 other target non-land permanent, and then return it later on, and Thalia gets stronger. Thalia seemed like an absolute delight in a Catchamos deck, and obviously other Blink stuff like Ephemerate and Flickerwisp, you know, the classics, fit really well into this shell. But let's not forget that Catchamos triggers off of cards getting exiled from graveyards as well. So why not throw in a Relic of Progenitus and an Emperor of Bones, the first one being a 1 mana artifact that just exiles cards repeatedly from a graveyard, the latter being a 2 mana 2/2 that at the beginning of combat on your turn exiles 1 target card from any graveyard, but you get the chance to get back a creature exiled with Emperor of Bones back later in the game. And Commander has so many good exile based removal spells. Swords to Plowshares, Despark, Anguished Unmaking. You will be drowning in card advantage, that I can promise. Killian Ink Duelist is a 2 mana 2/2 human warlock with lifelink and menace. Also, spells you cast that target a creature cost 2 less to cast. Killian is a very fascinating commander to me because he offers something that is pretty unique in black and white, mana cheating. And not in the form of a ritual, but instead a static ability. Spells that target usually include instants, sorceries, and enchantments, or specifically auras. That means you can take Killian in different directions on a base level. The many removal spells in black and white become a whole lot cheaper, which is nice to have, but unlocking Killian's true potential means targeting your own creatures. The most obvious way would be to go into a full-on aura, maybe even Voltron deck, playing all the best enchantments. But Killian is from Strixhaven, so I wondered there was maybe a black-white Spellslinger deck out there waiting to be built. In newer formats, we associate red with rituals, but black really is the OG fast mana color. There are tons of ritual you can put into your Killian deck. And then we have payoffs in the form of creatures like Monastery Mentor, which creates monk tokens that have prowess, Sedgemoor Witch, which creates 1/1 black and green pest tokens that have when this dies you gain a life, or spells like Astral Steel, which is a 3 mana instant that has Storm, which is pretty uncommon for a white instant. Or Show of Confidence, a 2 mana instant from Strixhaven. Whenever you cast a spell, copy it for each other instant and sorcery spell you've cast this turn, and you may choose new copies. And the actual effect is put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains vigilance until end of turn. So it has Pseudo Storm, but it only counts instants and sorceries. And last but not least, the classic Tendrils of Agony. Why not? Tendrils of Agony, 4 mana sorcery, target player loses 2 life, you gain 2 life, and it has Storm. Maybe this will be where I can finally test out Toshiro Umezawa, who was also featured on the Black Commander list, a 3 mana 2/2 human samurai that, I mean, it has Bushido 1, but who cares? But whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may play target instant card from your graveyard. If that creature would be put into the graveyard this turn, remove it instead. Liesa Shroud of Dusk. Liesa. By far my favorite commander deck. It's a 5 mana 5/5 angel, and rather than paying commander tax, you get to cast Liesa by paying life equal to the amount of commander tax. So if your commander tax is just 2, you pay 2 life. If your commander died twice, commander tax is 4, you pay 4 life instead of actually upping the mana cost. It itself is a flying lifelink angel, 5/5 as I said, and whenever a player casts a spell, they lose 2 life. Symmetrical, so you lose 2 life as well whenever you cast a spell. I don't want to say too much for Liesa, since I am very biased, except that she truly showed me that sometimes a good stuff deck with a commander that isn't this game-breaking card that needs to be removed ASAP is way more fun than finely tuned synergy-based decks. Not always, but sometimes. The next entry on this list doesn't need an introduction, but I'm still gonna do it, of course. It's Lurrus of the Dream Den, a 3 mana 3/2 cat nightmare. It's a companion, a dreaded companion. With the companion rule, each permanent card in your starting deck has to be mana value 2 or less. Lurrus is lifelink, and once during each of your turns, you may cast a permanent spell with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard. My highest rank I ever achieved on Magic Arena I owe to Lurrus, who even after the errated companion rule was still an absolute menace and ended up banned in almost every format. But you know where he isn't banned? In Commander. And let me make this clear. I think you should absolutely try having Lurrus as a companion, maybe even in a low to the ground Killian deck. But if you choose the big scary cat as your commander, the companion rule suddenly becomes a companion guideline. You will find many great 2-cost cards that sacrifice themselves, like the aforementioned Selfless Spirit or Angelic Renewal, which is a 2 mana enchantment. Whenever a creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may sacrifice Angelic Renewal. If you do, return the creature to the battlefield. These cards sacrifice themselves to protect Lurrus while he's on the battlefield, and as a reward, they get to come back and do it again and again and again. Doesn't that sound like fun? If you want to include your favorite pet permanent, since we don't care about the companion restriction as much anymore, and it costs more than 2 mana, you still can. I, for one, would play one of my many copies of Sun Titan, since it fulfills a similar role of bringing back lower cost cards from the graveyard over and over again. Moira and Teshar, 5 mana, 4/5 Phyrexian Spirit Bird, one of those team-ups we got. It has flying, and whenever you cast a historic spell, return target non-land permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, but you have to exile it at the beginning of the next end step. If it would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. This is pretty insane when paired with the many 0 mana artifacts like Mishra's Bauble or Ornithopter or really anything, which are by far the easiest way to trigger the historic clause. And then really the world is your oyster. Black is great at getting good stuff into the graveyard. One thing that needs mentioning, that might not be super obvious at first glance, is that you can blink and flicker the permanents you get back, since the replacement effect of Moira and Teshar only kicks in when the card moves to a zone other than the exile zone. So if you can get back stuff that exiles itself and then returns, et voila, suddenly you permanently got something back from the graveyard. I will make a party deck at one point that I have sworn to myself. And if you, like me, don't want to go for a 5-mana version with Tazri Beacon of Unity, I think Nalia might be one of the best options for a commander. Nalia is a 3-mana 3/3 human rogue, so of course it fulfills one of the party roles already. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, and Wizard spells from the top of your library, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you have a full party, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and these creatures gain Death Touch until end of turn, making it very uncomfortable to block your party. If you search for party in the Oracle text on Scryfall, you will find the best payoffs, like Burako's party leader, who could also be your commander if you wanted to. It's a 4-mana 2/4 orc that is everything: a cleric, a rogue, a warrior, a wizard. And when it attacks, defending player loses X life, and you create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of creatures in your party. So it doesn't even need a full party. And additionally, if you want to run this as your commander, you also get to choose a background to get a second color into your color identity. Black-White has pretty good coverage for most of these types. It has roughly 500 clerics, 180 rogues, less important since your commander in Nalia would be a rogue, 277 warriors, and 180 wizards. And worst case, shapeshifters are your best friends for party decks, always. Retta Drawback of Urborg is a 4-mana 3/3 zombie wizard. It has Vigilance and Ward 2, Ward 2 being, of course, very nice on a commander. Other zombies you control have Vigilance. Vigilance, extremely good keyword in Commander, since you can attack someone and are not left open to the wrath of all the other players. But most importantly, whenever another legendary creature you control dies, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary, and it's a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. A few things. First of all, tokens not being legendary, huge. Let's talk about that later. Second of all, the legendary creature that dies is not exiled, so you can reanimate it if you want to. Zombies is an archetype that is closer aligned with more mono black and maybe black and blue, but Retta Drawback really offers a unique spin on it. The fact that the tokens lose legendary restriction is pretty crazy, considering doubling tokens is not that hard. You can rely on cards like Teysa Karlov, which straight up doubles the triggers of things dying. The populate mechanic, while not too many cards exist of it, is another example of how you would get extra copies of a sweet legendary. And one card that I wanted to talk about, because I personally didn't know it existed before this video, is the Civic Ceremony, a 3 black pip legendary enchantment. Creature spells you cast cost 2 less to cast, but whenever a creature you control enters, if you cast it, destroy that creature, then create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. So what would happen would be Retta Drawback is out, Civic Ceremony is out, you cast a 7-mana legendary, it immediately dies, so you immediately get a 2/2 black zombie, doubling up your ETBs of that legendary, which can be incredible. So really what you should be looking for is really good ETBs on legendary creatures in the white-black color identity. Strixhaven is a set that, since its release, has really grown on me. So coming up is a commander from the Certainly Not Harry Potter set. Let's talk about the Elder Dragon Shadrix Silverquill. Shadrix is a 5-mana 2/5 Elder Dragon. It has flying and double strike, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may choose 2. Each mode must target a different player. First option, target player creates a 2/1 white and black inkling creature token with flying. Second option, target player draws a card and loses 1 life. And third option, target player puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature they control. Shadrix reminds me of Glunch, who we talked about in the Selesnya video. As in, you are forced to give at least one of your opponents something, but not all modes on this card were created equal. Drawing a card is always nice, but depending on the board state, a 2/1 flying is pretty useless, and if you run a Spellslinger deck, the last mode won't really matter to you. I think Shadrix, if not chosen as a commander, might go into the same deck as cards like Brina and everything I mentioned for her. Also, special shout out because he gives you a chance to truly revel in the spirit of Elder Dragon Highlander. For its huge flavor win, I wanted to include Shilgengar, a 5-mana 6/6 with flying. Flying? Huh, I thought Gengar lost its immunity to ground in Gen 6. Anyways, Shilgengar has 2 paragraphs of text we need to go through. First, sacrifice another creature, create a blood token. If you sacrificed an angel this way, create a number of blood tokens equal to its toughness instead. And secondly, a way to use those blood tokens for 3 hybrid black and white mana, sacrifice 6 blood tokens. Return each creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Those creatures are vampires in addition to their other types. It is so fun to put a dark spin on your angel deck because ideally you probably curve a few cheaper angels, 2 should suffice most of the time, and maybe a buried alive into your commander, and then you reanimate all those holy angels as vampire vessels. If you're curious what the best ways to create blood tokens without Shilgengar are, I'd say Voldaren Bloodcaster, a 2-mana 2/1 that creates a blood token whenever it or another creature you control dies. Moonstone Eulogist, which creates a blood token whenever an opponent's creature dies. And Camber the Plunderer, which does the same but also gains you a life while doing so, are premium blood token creators. And then you get to decide whether you want to 1-turn kill your opponents by creating a board state that locks him out of doing anything, or you just want to use this repeatedly and build a stronger and stronger board, but not one-shot everyone. I had to put one Teysa on here as she is the leader of the Orzhov Guild, and I decided to go with Teysa Opulent Oligarch. She is a 3-mana 2/3 human advisor with Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, investigate for each opponent who lost life this turn. Whenever a clue you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. This ability triggers only once each turn as a safety valve. To enable Teysa, you could either attack and make your opponents lose life the old-fashioned way, or you play cards like Creeping Bloodsucker, which just at the beginning of your upkeep deals 1 to each opponent for a measly 2 mana, or Blind Obedience, also 2 mana, a bit of a stacks piece, and it has Extort, which makes it so whenever you cast a spell, you can pay 1 extra, and then each opponent loses 1 life, and thus enabling Teysa. If you want to benefit from all the clues lying around, Inspiring Statuary might be what you're looking for. It's a 3-mana artifact that gives all non-artifact spells you cast improvise, meaning you can tap artifacts to reduce the cost of all your non-artifact spells, which is a huge boon in any deck. If you, as a smart oligarch, wanted to diversify your artifact portfolio, you could play Academy Manufactor, which is a 3-mana 1/3. If you would create a clue, food, or treasure token, instead you create 1 of each. If instead you wanted to go more into this spirit direction, a card that I recently lost to is Thales Reverent Medium, a 5-mana 3/4 human cleric, legendary creature, so it could also be a commander, just saying. At the beginning of each end step, create X 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying, where X is the number of tokens you created this turn. And of course, last but not least, who you gonna call when you want to kill your opponents in one big fell swoop? It's the tag team of Marionette Apprentice and Marionette Master, who drain your opponents for life whenever an artifact you control is put into the graveyard. Next on the list is a truly unique commander, as Tomic, Wielder of Law, is the only card in the entirety of Magic that has affinity for Planeswalkers. And thus, we have our first Super Friends commander on this list. Let's go a bit more into depth. Apart from affinity for Planeswalkers, Tomic is a 3-mana 2/4 Flying Vigilance, and whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or Planeswalkers you control, that opponent loses 3 life, and you draw a card. At first, I was a bit skeptical, thinking there probably weren't a lot of Planeswalkers in white and black, but then I remembered there's like 12 Gideons alone, and in total, I think 80 Planeswalkers is a solid number. Now, that isn't to say that all of them, or even most of them, are good, but you probably only need 20 good Planeswalkers for a Super Friends deck, and then you really have some quite nice ones to pick from. If you wanted to make use of Tomic's draw ability, you could, for example, play Gideon Jura, a 5-mana Planeswalker whose +2 ability forces target opponent to attack Gideon, thus triggering Tomic and making you draw a card. Or instead, if you want to deter your opponents from attacking you or Planeswalkers you control, Teo is your best Super Friend, as his -2 ability makes it so you choose left or right, and until your next turn, each player may attack only the next opponent in that direction, and Planeswalkers of that player, making it that you can only get attacked by one player. On a 3-mana Planeswalker that comes with an 0/4 wall with Defender and Flying, I think that's pretty powerful. The supporting cast in this particular episode of Super Friends could consist of any number of proliferate cards, and cards with similar effects as Tomic, like Rena, who we talked about, like Mangara, who we talked about, and your favorite suit of Pillow Fort cards, who a few of them I mentioned for the Doxos part of the video. We're not slowing down because the next one is another super unique design. It is Verrak, Warped Sengir, a 3-mana 2/2 vampire with Flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink, very appropriate for a vampire. And whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, if life was paid to activate it, you may pay that much life again. If you do, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So to break it down, we are looking for activated abilities that also make you pay life. If you find an ability like that and you activate it, you get to pay twice as much life, and you get to activate that ability 2 times. I feel like I haven't said this in a while, and it feels strange, but this is really good with fetch lands. Fetch lands, of course, referring to lands who, as an activated ability, you tap them, you pay 1 life, you sacrifice them to search your library for a, in this case, Plains or Swamp card, and put it onto the battlefield. If Verrak is out, you just pay 2 life and search your library for 2 Plains or Swamp cards, making this a form of white and black ramp that is not the catch-up mechanic that we are used to. I encourage you to go on the journey to find the best activated abilities that require life being paid for yourself. But to give you 2 more examples, Rezakath the Foul-Blooded is an 8-mana 8/8 demon, Flying Trample, and it lets you pay 2 life and sacrifice a creature to search your library for a card and put it into your hand. And Priest of Fell Rites is a 2-mana 2/2 human warlock. You tap it, you pay 3 life, and sacrifice it to return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. If you want, I have like an almost ready to play build of Verrak on my Mox field. I'll link it down below so you can take a look, but it's by no means a finished and polished product. But it does include some of the more viable activated abilities that require you to pay life. Last, but certainly not least, we have Victor Valgavoth's Seneschal, a 3-mana 3/3 human warlock with the ability that whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, surveil 2 if this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. If it's the second time, each opponent discards a card. And if it's the third time, put a creature card from any graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It feels very much like a black and white enchantment Omnath, but I feel like it might be relatively hard to get 3 enchantments into play, at least early on into the game. I think should we ever go back to Duskmourn and we get more Glimmer and maybe Shard tokens, Victor will get a nice boost in power. In the meantime, I would try to also rely on enchantment creatures that you can flicker, which is an easy way to get multiple enchantments to enter at the same time. I feel like this could go into a Daxos the Return deck, maybe, because Daxos puts black and white enchantment creatures into the battlefield, and a must include from Duskmourn from the same set, in my opinion, would be Soaring Lightbringer, a 5 mana 4/5, flying. Other enchantment creatures you control have flying, and whenever you attack a player, create a 1/1 white Glimmer enchantment creature token that's tapped and attacking that player. So if you attack 3 players at the same time, you will get 3 1/1 white Glimmer enchantment creature tokens, thus triggering Eerie 3 times, gaining the full potential, Surveil 2, each opponent discards a card, and you get to reanimate a creature. Though, to be fair, if you have this as your commander, you have to realize just how powerful Surveil 2 is on every enchantment you play. If you've made it this far, first of all, congrats. You're either a real trooper or asleep, I guess. But anyways, I would like to do a little CTA, a call to arms, if you will, and ask you to consider subscribing. I don't upload super regularly, so if you do enjoy this series, it might be a no downsides play to subscribe, really. For this color combination, I think my favorites besides Liesa are Atomic, because he is genuinely unique in his affinity to Planeswalkers, and I haven't built a Super Friends deck yet. And as mentioned before, a Killian deck might be really nice, maybe even with Lurrus as a commander. Anyways, always remember, be kind to yourself and others. Goodbye.